We're back here with Mr. Y, the social studies guy, and as I look back when I taught this wonderful course of Ohio history, back when it was in the 7th grade, where it was really a lot of neat things we could do with it. Obviously, the whole idea of the 88 counties was a big part. Now today, since the State Department of Education has moved it to the 4th grade, the teachers don't have the time to do that. They focus more on the history, but again, to me, the whole idea of the counties was so important. And so what happened was all the students got a county that they picked out of a big list, and they ended up doing reports on those. And as a part of those reports, they contacted newspapers, they got a lot of information, they went to the library and found things out. And many, which was really nice, many students, their families actually took them to those counties and took some pictures and were able to put those into the reports, and that was a really big thing. Now, one of the reasons, again, that we're doing this is to help out the younger kids who don't get that intensive Ohio history course anymore like we used to have. But it's also nice for my former students to look back and think about the counties that they did the reports on. And of course we had the what I call infamous 88 county blank map test, where again the students had to study, and I always suggested they break Ohio down into 4 sections, into Northeast Ohio, Northwest, Southwest, and Southeast, and learn those by then, and they'd be able to fill out that blank map. And then, after that, we gave them some time off before they had to get a blank map, not really a blank map, but a map that showed the counties, but they had to put in the county seats. And that's what we've been doing in our video series, is starting out at our county seat towns and starting out at the courthouses. So we'll continue doing that. But what's interesting is when you look at these different places throughout Ohio, there's so many fascinating names. Now, again, spending the majority of my time teaching in Clyde, Ohio, what happened was Clyde, Ohio was a very important little town for people that were traveling east and west on the Maumee Turnpike, which was basically at that time with stagecoaches was basically a dirt road. But Clyde was one of those stops along the way for the stagecoaches. And at that time, it wasn't called Clyde, okay? And it was Hamer's Corners. And what happens is, as that town began to grow, they had suggestions on what should we name this town. And they had a lot of different ideas. They couldn't agree on any of them. But one of the stagecoach passengers actually said, well, I'm from Clyde, New York, and we really like our town. And our town was named after the River Clyde in Scotland. So the inhabitants of Hamer's Corners said, that sounds like a great idea. So that's how Clyde came to be. Now, I've been living here in Green Springs for a very long time, and Green Springs is very simple about, obviously, how they got its name, because of the fact it is the world's largest natural sulfur springs. But when you look at many of these towns, you kind of wonder how they got their names. Now, probably the most important one that my students love was when we talked about Knockham Stiff in Ross County, which was a very tiny village. In fact, as a village, it no longer exists. It's now a township. But people said, you know, Mr. Y, Mr. Young, how can you find out the name? Can you find out the name of how it got to be called Knockham Stiff? And I guess it was because they had some saloons in that original village, and there was a lot of fights, unfortunately, and some people actually got knocked out. So Knockham Stiff became that particular name. But there's so many interesting towns. Like, I always find it interesting when I see people wearing T-shirts that say, I've been to hell, which is in Michigan, okay, our northern neighbor. And most people don't know that actually in Ohio, there is a Hell Town. Hell Town is in Boston Township in Summit County on the edge of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. So I guess you could say you've been to hell too if you do that place in Ohio. Not just go to the one in Michigan, but right in Ohio also. So many different places that when you look at the map, which is one right behind me, okay, that you could go and visit places. Like if you want to tell people, I've been to Africa, very simply, you could do that right in Ohio, right in Delaware County. Okay, so it makes people think you've been on safari. You haven't been on safari. even down in Delaware County. Some of the other towns that are very interesting is, of course, Atlanta, the biggest city in Georgia we think of, but it's actually a small village in Pickaway County. Baltimore, my originally home state, I'm originally from Maryland, is, of course, the biggest city in Maryland, but it's also in Ohio, a small town in Fairfield County. There are so many different towns that are so interesting as we go through here, and I was able to write down numerous ones that I thought were really interesting. Like, for example, we think of the Holy Land, we think of Bethlehem, obviously, and Bethlehem in Ohio there's actually several of them. One is in Marion County, one is in Crawford County, so you got to be careful which Bethlehem you're going to as you travel throughout Ohio. Boston, of course, largest city in Massachusetts, very historical town. There's Boston, which is in Summit County. But there's also 6 other Bostons that have been in Ohio, and many of them have changed their names along the way. So when you go through and find these different places, you find that so many of them were so popular that the towns actually had to change things, okay, when they went along the way. Florida, everybody wants to go to Florida for vacation. Well, just go to Henry County. Not too far from Napoleon is Florida, Ohio. And also there in Henry County is Texas, Ohio. So any Texas Longhorn fans, go to Henry County and you can tell people you've been to Texas. Kansas, Ohio, and Seneca County, again named after the state. So many different places that are throughout here that are just very interesting. I taught Canadian Studies also, and we have Ontario, Ohio, which is in Richland County just outside of Mansfield. People always think they might want to go to Paris sometime in their lifetime. Well, Paris, again, a place you could go to in Ohio, right in Stark County. Poland, Ohio, very historic town. Of course, we think of Poland, of course, in Europe, but Poland in Mahoning County. Rome, named after, obviously, the largest city in Italy, Ashtabula County. And many of these, as we go through them, actually have some different pronunciations. For example, Venice, and we have Venice in Sandusky County, but also near the city of Sandusky in Erie County, but also a Venice in Butler County. But again, when you talk about some of the Italian names, some of them are pronounced a little bit differently. So staying with the Italian names, in Italy, there is Genoa. In Ohio, we have right very close to us, we have Genoa, Ohio. So again, spelled the same way, but pronounced a little differently in Ottawa County. We have, one thing I found very interesting was that the Houston, huge city in Texas, in Ohio, it's Houston, spelled the same way, but pronounced Houston. And of course, we hear a lot right now about the country of Russia, which in Ohio, spelled the same way, is Rushi. Of course, one of the more popular ones would be in Peru, you have Lima, Peru, which is Lima, Ohio, just like lima bean. And we have, with people that like to go to Bob Evans Farm, okay, we have, of course, down in Texas, the Rio Grande River, which is Rio Grande here in Ohio. So there's a lot of things that make Ohio interesting. Obviously, this is one, just finding out about the counties, the names of the counties. We're always telling you at the beginning of the videos how the counties got their name. I think that's very, very important. And as we go through this video series, you're going to learn a lot more about different things in the state of Ohio.